topic of discussion is approving the 28 proposals that have been submitted. Annie did a lot of the legwork already with going through all the proposals. She has some good spreadsheets that she'll show you all in a little bit and lead that discussion as far as ranking. And so a lot of the work is done, as at least in our opinion. And so it just needs some guidance from y'all as the steering committee to approve or and custom discuss. As far as acres, 6,568 acres with a cost of $294,000. Average cost per acre, which is something that they focused on in these past couple of years, has been $45 an acre. So looking pretty good there. And so we had 135,000 in the standard, and then 73,000 in Neches River. After we go into the approvals for the proposals, we need to have some discussions on project extensions. There's been Annie's been dealing with it for a couple years now, but for a variety of reasons, landowners dragging their feet or weather, which has been huge, lack of vendors, all sorts of reasons. There's been a lot of extension requests, which is fine, but some of those landowners are then asking for or putting in new proposals and with pretty hefty price tags, and so we've discussed not allowing new proposals if there's an existing proposal that hasn't been completed, and but there's all sorts of variations there. We'll talk about that more when we get to that point, but that's just a brief overview of that. And then as far as action requested from y'all, Annie will show you the slides, and that'll make more sense. But the recommended approvals that we already have are in green, and then if that action item that we just talked about, talking about project extensions and maybe canceling or not allowing new project proposals with existing projects not done yet, if that happens, then we will have some money freed up, and we'll be able to fund some projects that are in yellow right now on Annie's spreadsheet, but we can put those in the green if we free up some of that money. So that'll all make more sense when we get to that point in the conversation. But that's about all I have with the agenda, and we can go into the discussion with the projects if y'all are okay with that, Bill.
Sounds good to me. Annie, any other questions from folks?
I don't have any questions, but I can start with my slides.
You can have at it.
Okay.
Take it away, Annie.
So this slide just shows a brief overview of where we are since 2017. As of yesterday, we had put $502,182 onto the ground in habitat work for treated 10,166 acres, completed 32 projects. We have 10 projects from this last RFP that are still in progress. And you can see on the map too, it's a pretty good spread across the whole CDN region. There's a couple areas that we really haven't hit very hard, but those folks in the Neches River are really killing it. So any questions on that map or current projects? Perfect. Next slide. All right, so this is what we received this year. On the map, all of the projects that are in green are what we are recommending to fund. All the yellow projects are, like Lee was saying, the maybe fund, if we can free up some other funds after we talk about these projects that are green. And the red ones we are not recommending to fund unless we end up freeing up a bunch more funds for them. But through the standard HIP, we had 4,100 acres submitted. We're recommending about 3,500 of them for $135,000. Almost 200,000 was submitted just for standard. And then Neches River PR HIP, we had 2,400 submitted. We're recommending about 1,700 for $73,000-ish. So next slide. All right, here's where I'm going to go into the tables. And I don't know if Bill sent these out, but this might be the first time you're seeing them. But this is very similar to what I sent out last year on just a very brief overview of every single proposal that I got and its rank in order. So the green ones, like I said, are the ones that we're recommending, yellow, maybe, and red, no. So any questions, comments, or assessment, just jump in. Go ahead to the next slide, Bill.
I would say that, you know, the scoring for some of the new people is pretty rigorous. It's a standard format that we've refined in specific scores. Some are extremely specific, some are more subjective, but it really helps us, you know, get to that upper level group of projects. I just wanted to bring that up, Annie.
Yeah, that's a good point. All these are scored based on the evaluation criteria that is sent out in the RFP. So everybody has access to that, but I'll go ahead and explain what goes into the scoring. So the standard HIP projects, they're evaluated based on if the proposal package is complete, what part of the geographic priority area they're in, if they're within the priority area, or the 0 to 2 mile buffer, or the 2 to 4 mile buffer, or outside of the priority area buffer. They're also evaluated based on their cooperation history with the CDN. If they fulfilled past agreements or they did not fulfill them, they are evaluated on if they have a management plan for their property. That could be from NRCS, TFS, TPWD, anything like that. They're also evaluated on good wildlife habitat management practices. Everyone sends in pictures with their proposal package and describes the habitat on the property and the goals of the landowner and whatnot. And so they're evaluated if it appears that they do have good management or not. And then property and project size. So there's a scale of 10 to 40, 41 to 100, and greater than 100 acres for their project treatment area. And then also their total land holdings within the CDN area. And then they'll also get points for having connectivity to known managed conservation lands. So if they border up against the WMA or National Forest or core land or anything like that. So that's where their evaluation score comes in. So you can see on this spreadsheet here, I have them ranked out in order of their evaluation score. A lot of it's prescribed burning. There's a little bit of herbicide in there, some mulching, very well built projects this year. I was really impressed with everyone's proposals. It looks like we are able to fully fund nine projects total through the standard HIP. We have just a little bit of money wiggle room there. So we'd like to discuss too on how you guys feel about the yellow projects. Would we want to bump up the project that scored lower because we have the funds to do it? Or does anyone have any questions on this? What is everyone's thoughts?
Might need a little longer to digest the spreadsheet.
Okay. The good news is there's been a lot of prescribed burning proposals, and those are low cost per acre. So we're able to fund more work and more acres this year.
the mulching bumps the cost up a little, I suppose, and then that tallow, the herbicide treatment is much more expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, mulching is ridiculous. Herbicide is still somewhat reasonable, but yeah, mulching is too much.
So another thing to note that Lee and Bill and I discussed yesterday, the Beach Creek project and the Nature's Wildlife Properties project, both of those are proposals. Both of those already have projects this year, and neither of them have reimbursed yet or requested reimbursement for those projects. But the project managers have both told us that they're on track to finish those projects and are planning to reimburse in full or just about full.
And Annie, I sorry to interrupt, but
That's
I did get an update from Andy this morning, and so it looks like he's still at, or Beach Creek is still at 467 acres out of the 650 that was planned, and the agreement was a payment rate of $25 per acre.
Yeah.
And so let's see. And then 45 acres of herbicide. So that's all done. And he did confirm that. And let's see. Yeah. So the bulk of the burned acres and all of the herbicide is done. So.
Okay, so that's 75% of that project for Beach
Yeah.
Creek is finished, and they were waiting on some warm season burns. So I don't know if that sways anyone's opinions or if you have any discussion points on that, since they are ranked third and they're proposing to burn 500 more acres, do fire lines, and do mulching. But they are requesting significantly less than the full reimbursement rate, because they wanted that to help them in the rankings and the decision process. So we can digest this a little bit longer, but also we can go forward and say we're good with the green projects if no one else has any comments. We can also say we can send out this spreadsheet and let us know by Friday or whatever works.
Has the steering committee, do they have access to all the projects or the actual proposal packets?
No, but if there's any specific question, I mean, there's just so much.
Yeah.
Each project. I mean,
historically, I mean, especially when y'all have met in person, is that what's happened? Is, y'all just pour over projects over a table, or does it usually happen like this?
Normally, it usually is just me and Bill and Jason that goes over
Okay.
all the projects. And then we send out this exact spreadsheet to the steering committee and say, if you have any specific questions on any of these projects, let us know. And we can send you the project proposal. But there's so much, many different files and stuff that are included. But I can send out the proposal package for any of these if anybody's interested.
I would support moving forward with the green projects.
Okay. Does anybody else have any objections?
I think we're good.
I think I'd be good with it as well. So.
Okay.
It really looks to me like, if I had to, just from the spreadsheet, evaluate, it's about the acreage is really how it looks like. The smaller acreages did not make it. Nothing under 221 acres got into the green. And everybody else below that was lower than that. So then it looks like we're trying to get as many acres done as we can, and then that they're contiguous to something valuable, and that they've been good partners so far. So
That is a good point. I mean, because of all these large acreage projects submitting for a lot of money, it does essentially kick out all the smaller projects. But we also have historically had pretty poor fulfillment of agreements on smaller landowners too. That doesn't factor into the evaluation criteria, but that's just been my experience, is there's not as much participation from the smaller landowners. We have a lot more issues getting reimbursement requests, and a lot of them fall out, and then we end up in more trouble trying to fulfill my NWTF's deliverables with our agreements for these projects.
Yeah.
Would there be any interest in, I mean, the second one in yellow, it looks like we could fund that with the money available. I mean, would there be any interest in, I know it doesn't rank out exactly that way, but we could bump that in to get another project in.
Yeah, we had talked about that. Is we were trying to figure out if we could finagle the evaluation criteria to bump that one above Skelton, above Chaparral Ranch, but there was no way that we could give them more points anywhere. But that is something worth discussing, and we can decide that we want, despite how it scored out, we still want to fund that project. It is a smaller landowner. I have had good success with Penny and her projects getting done. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that project was a forester from Arkansas, her family land in Cass County.
That's correct. It was
Right.
A family property that they were familiar. She works for the State Division of Forestry in Arkansas, and she has quite a bit of experience in preparing private lands, forest management plans, and she prepared a plan for their family property and was looking for incentives and funding available for a number of reasons outside of NRCS, because I think it was just an initial early process for that family to go through, and it was an interesting chain of events that got them to this level. But it was Penny's done a good job pulling that together and making a proposal out of it. Like Annie alluded to, we spent a fair amount of time trying to juggle, looking at scores that are more subjective to see if things could be adjusted. And Laura, good point. You know, the smaller projects, especially those that focus on high cost. You take the two Leon County projects in red. They were primarily mulching, and it's really difficult to show a reasonable cost per acre when all of your treatment is mechanical. If there's not an additional prescribed fire element in there, the amount of acres and the impact on that property is both high cost and fairly minimal. So that's where they come out when they score that way. All of those issues, give it that lower ranking. So
the Chaparral Ranch Road project, Lee had a little bit of background on that one, where, I mean, can you talk about that, Lee, what we had talked about?
Yeah, well, just after reading the proposal, it was it's just very obvious that it's nothing but a pine plantation. It's a recently thinned pine plantation if you look at the years there, and so it's going to be for a lot of the objectives of the CDN. It's going to be a clear cut in 10 years. is really what it comes down to. And so getting some good TSI in there is good in any circumstance, even if that is the case. And it is helping with habitat in the short term. But as far as long term, work on the site, there's not a lot of wildlife management going on there. It's timber driven just by reading the plan. I haven't been on the property. I'm familiar with the landowner, and there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. It just it seems like some of the other cooperators are a little more in line with what the CDN wants.
I was glad to hear you say that, because of course I'm sitting here looking at where's Harrison and Marion County and all this, and
Yeah,
wanting them to get a project funded, but that makes sense, and I'm glad it's ranked on other things rather than location.
Yeah. No, I mean, and really, especially, Marion County, there's just, and Cass County. I mean, that whole place is pine plantation too. And so, it's tough to find those landowners that are really wildlife driven and habitat driven. And a lot of those people in the green, that's their, it's more in line with what we want.
Bill, go back. So if we did, that's the background on Chaparral Ranch and Skelton. If we did go ahead and want to fund Skelton, we can bump it up. That would push us to 133,352 funds allocated, or dollars allocated. So we would still be under that 135, but we would be able to fund that project. Is everyone okay with that? Does anyone have any problems with that? In the past too, normally when we're telling people that they did not get funded, we have sent some constructive criticism back on their proposal on why it possibly scored lower. Some of them we recommend that were really high cost per acre that scored low. We recommended going to NRCS, getting involved in any of those programs. So we usually will provide some constructive criticism on each project.
Annie, can I ask a kind of a stupid question? And I'm not sure. I mean, I know you guys have ranked them and prioritized them, and obviously the ones in yellow are the next to be funded, and they're scored according to the way they came out, which is Chaparral Ranch first, and then Skelton. Can you bypass one to approve the lesser of that and stay within the kosher that you guys are looking to stay within the limit of? I know that when we deal with an application and we rank it, if we don't have enough money to fund, say for instance, Chaparral, we couldn't go around penny to penny. So I'm just kind of curious, not knowing the system you guys have in place and being new to this.
Yes, so we don't have any rules.
Okay, just curious.
As we go. I've been
So
making it up as I go, to be honest.
You got me straight, Annie. That's all I needed to know.
So that's where the subjectivity comes in. We're able to be a little bit more flexible than NRCS. Obviously, we want to follow the rankings.
Yeah, very good. No, that's good. That's all I was just kind of trying to get an idea on that one.
It would really be a vote and a discussion from everybody else on how you guys feel about that, because I can't be the one to make all the decisions, because it wouldn't be great for me to make all the decisions. So that's why we have a steering committee. So that makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't be able to go around.
Well, it sounds like, you took the top scoring and that there were criteria in that about habitat. and about acreage and about participation and about continuity with other good lands. And so moving forward with funding the green sounds easy enough. And then that leaves you with not enough money to do Chaparral Ranch. So the justification for funding Skelton is why not if we have a little left over.
And the reason that Chaparral Ranch scored higher is because it had a higher acreage. It met that criteria for more than 100 acres, which gave them 15 points, whereas Skelton had less than 40, and that only gave them 5 points.
So the 10-point difference right there is size, not quality.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And we wouldn't have money to do Chaparral if we follow the rankings. So I think that you have enough cover to go with Skelton.
Okay. Does anybody else have any problems with that?
I think the only argument would be whether you partially funded Chaparral. I mean, that would be the only other argument you could say would be, well, you should offer them partial funding versus jumping over them. And I don't have a problem with jumping over them so we could fully fund the next project down, but that is something that could be considered.
So if we partially funded Chaparral Ranch up to 135,000, that would only be 40 acres of earth that we would fund, $3,585.
So it gets about a third of that project.
So essentially it would be the exact same, almost the exact same, but it would be less, it would be herbicide versus burning.
Well, we heard that Chaparral is largely pine. What's Skelton? Sorry if I missed it.
Good question. Pull that up real quick. A lot of words in this proposal.
Yeah, and it's what I recall is that it was a mixed pine hardwood, more of a natural type stand, and some of what they're doing is dealing with some storm damage as well. So what they're trying to do is you bring the stand into a better condition. It's going to be very selectively thin.
Those habitats on the Skelton Family Forest is chiefly native, mature, mixed shortleaf pine, hardwood timber. It's managed for multiple conservation uses, including timber production, wildlife habitat, recreation, and aesthetics. They use multiple management practices across the property, including active timber management, prescribed fire, and chemical control of undesirable plants. It's in south central Cass County. The property occurs in the Cypress River Basin, west of Jim's Bayou. Large change in topography from 270 elevation at the Ponds Inlet on the eastern property line to the highest elevation of 400 feet in the northwest corner. Timber is chiefly mature mixed shortleaf pine hardwood stands. Lowest elevations form creeks in oak and other hardwoods and are managed as a streamside management zone. Mixed or mid-aged pines are intermixed with hardwoods. Sounds like they have a lot of different habitat types.
So maybe I missed that, Annie. What is that was the Skelton property
Yes.
you're describing, right?
Yes.
And what is the total property acreage? That sounds like that's more than 38 acres of total, but they're only addressing.
They're total 160, but they're only addressing 38.
Okay.
Well, and I've had a couple text messages as well about the Fogel farm. That first one in red below that is almost the same acreage with an even better cost per acre at the same score as the Skelton. And it starts getting into that, if we had the money, do we fund one or two or parts of three?
Well, I think that's a good point, Bill, is that I didn't notice those had the same scores. I was just looking at yellow versus red, but they sure do. It would get Harrison County represented, whereas Cass has got 2 in the green.
Very true. The Fogel farm is, they're trying to burn 32 acres of a 203 acre tract of mixed hardwoods and pine. The current condition of the understory inhibits the growth of a quality herbaceous layer, and the project goal is to reduce fuel loads and open up some space within the forest to promote quality habitat.
Does it have any SMZs?
Does not specifically say. No, it doesn't say.
What's the landowner name?
Fogel?
Fogel. I know it. Is that the last name?
Audrey Fogel. Yeah. F-O-G-L-E. And Audrey Fogel and Jonathan Fogel.
And it's Harrison County, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And what I recall was it's a major tributary to the Sabine, where two branches come together. I can't remember the creek or the stream's name, but it does have some, it looks to have some fairly significant bottomland hardwood at the lower end. And they've been in the MLD program for 12, 14 years, something like that, as a cooperator. So they've done some things in the past with a number of wildlife habitat improvements. So they had a good record there.
So I guess my question is why if Skelton and Fogel are both the same, get the same score of 55, why was one yellow and why was one red?
I think, if I remember correctly, it came down to, at that point it was subjective, came down to project manager. I have had really poor luck with David Campbell and his projects being finished. I don't know if he has just had bad luck with landowners or what, but not a single one of his projects has ever been fully reimbursed.
Oh.
So that would factor in from my perspective. We don't want to allocate money knowing that it might not be fulfilled.
Is Rusty on the call?
Rusty's on, but I don't know if he has video capability.
Okay.
Hey guys, I'm on. I'm listening in. I've got another meeting with a physician for my daughter here in just a second, so I was just listening in. But it looks to me like there's enough money to fund both of those projects, the Skelton and Fogel. Am I wrong?
That was my take too, Rusty.
You could fund both of those projects.
Yeah, we're about $400 short of that 135 if you fund both. And I would be totally fine with funding Skelton and Fogel Farm. if you guys are okay with it.
I like that alternative. I think that's a real good move, and it's based on, you know, cost per acre and getting a little bit more geographic representation and having mixed habitat as opposed to largely monoculture at Chaparral. Chaparral's too expensive and pine, and the other two have a better mix in our price range. So
Yep. Does anybody else have any issues with funding both of those?
Looks good.
All right. Perfect. So that would put us at $134,472 and bring our average cost per acre to $37.94. Perfect. All right. If there's no other questions or comments about the standard HIP proposals, we'll go ahead and bump those Skelton and Fogle Farm up into the green, with the reason that Chaparral Ranch is too expensive and just a pine monoculture. And then we'll fund all the green ones. All right, Bill, next slide. All right, here's our Neches River HIP proposals. We have enough money to fund 6 of them. To note on this page, the Bluff City project was moved from the standard HIP to the Neches River HIP. It could either go in both. It was submitted under standard, but it could be funded with the Neches River. We had some concerns about that one because it was aerial herbicide treatment and it costs more. But that is allowed under the Neches River HIP. And then the big one that we wanted to talk about was White Rock, because it was the project that ranked out the highest, but they have not finished their project from this year. So right now, they have a project for this current project cycle to complete 672 acres of prescribed fire for $19,988. And they have only completed 45 acres of that prescribed burning and are requesting an extension for that project. And then they went ahead and submitted another proposal for 281 acres of herbicide treatment. They've been a really good cooperator otherwise, but we don't feel good about giving them $20,000 more to do a treatment when they already have about $18,000 still that they haven't reimbursed for. The next slide we have all about the discussion for White Rock. So I'll move on real quick to the Nathaniel Robinson project. Bill has already worked it out with Jenny, and TLIT is going to fund that project. They already had a project that was approved with TLIT, and we just added this herbicide treatment to that project. So that one is off the table. It's been moved to TLIT. One other thing to note for the Neches River HIP projects, these are the ones that have to be only prescribed burning or herbicide, no ground disturbance, since it is PR money going on the private lands. These projects, once they are approved, I'll have to send all the GIS information and proposals to Jason Harden, who then has to take it through all their avenues of Parks and Wildlife on getting the Section 7 and the art clearance all done. That last year, we approved all the projects right around the same time, mid-July, end of July, and did not get the approval for those projects until December. So we're trying to move as quickly as we can with these projects to get them approved. But does anyone have any questions on the green projects? Nature's Bluff, that one's pretty exciting. That one is Amanda Harrelson. She came to us last minute and said, do you have any money? We bought a new property in Houston County. Want to burn it. So I think that one is exciting that one ranked out pretty high. Bobcat Ridge, they've been a really good cooperator. Another thing to note about Bobcat Ridge, in the NETX or in the standard HIP, they also applied. So they submitted 2 proposals, one for standard HIP and one for Nature's River HIP, both equaling $20,000. So how do we feel about that? The standard HIP project there, it was 619 acres of prescribed burning. The Nature's River project is 638 acres of prescribed burning. So they're trying to burn a lot this year, and they are working the system to try to get the most money.
Are most of those, Annie, using a contractor to do that, or are they themselves using it, doing them?
You know, I'm not sure. Did you know, Bill? You were the one that had talked to Jeff about that.
They have a prescribed burn contractor that works with the company, with the it's an LLC, and that does their timber management. So.
Does anyone have any concerns with Bobcat having 2 proposals for $40,000 total?
What's their history? Have they had projects in the past, Annie, that they've been good cooperators, or this first time, or?
They had projects in the Natchez River. They had a Natchez River project in 2019. Their agreement was signed in 2018 with us, so they got in with the first RFP on that. They completed it halfway in 2019. They requested 15,000 for 593 acres, and they completed 312.
So they're still carrying some forward?
No, they decided they did not want to move forward on an extension or anything like that. So that money was reallocated.
I seem to remember Bobcat Ridge being presented at a CDN meeting, pictures, and maybe it was.
It has.
Where they were listening for birds, perhaps. I don't know, it stuck out in my mind as being a special property.
Yeah, okay, so I missed, they also had a standard project that was signed last year, or in 2018. That one was 938 acres of prescribed burning and about a mile of fire breaks. They completed that one in full. They requested 20,000, which was their full proposal, and it was $21.32 an acre. So they completed that one, but they did not complete the Natchez River one.
I think another point to bring up with Bobcat Ridge is that most of the area, if not all the areas, under a conservation easement. It was originally held by the Conservation Fund. It's been transferred to the Texas Conservation Trust. And they're under a very specific regimen for open pine, prescribed fire on their uplands, and bottomland hardwood. It's a pretty aggressive ownership group that is conservation minded. So if that helps.
They also are a turkey co-op, so it's a high priority for turkey habitat. So if we were to say fund one and not the other, I would want to fund the Natchez River one. It would make the most sense to fund the Natchez River one. So do we have any additional thoughts on Bobcat Ridge? Are we okay with funding both?
Annie, do you think it'd be a good idea to maybe, you know, let it slide this time and maybe in the future, just to avoid this, you know, have something in writing that they can't do both niches and standard?
I think we could do that. Put that out in the RFP. You can submit for one or the other, not both.
Yeah, and personally, I mean, since it's Bobcat Ridge and they've been a good cooperator, I mean, I don't have a problem with it because I think they're going to make good on their deal. But it opens up the door if you start doing that. So.
Well, especially since we're turning people away.
Yeah.
But it seems like they're going to be able to make a pretty big impact, and they've been pretty aggressive. And I'm sure if they apply next year, it'll be looked at with a really fine-tooth comb.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, that's what it's really about. It's not about taking care of the landowners as bad as it is to say. It's about taking care of the land. So they're gonna take care of a lot of it.
How do we feel about the aerial herbicide treatment? That is listed as a practice on our standard HIP. It's not listed as a practice on our Nature's River HIP. Nature's River really only says you can do just the basic herbicide practice, $89 an acre. Because we moved it from standard to the Nature's River, do we want to honor the $123 an acre, or do we go back and offer them $89 an acre, approved for $89 an acre? Herbicide or aerial herbicide treatment would be fine under this agreement though, too, just because there is no ground disturbance on that either. That would drop them down to $9,532 total.
Which would allow us to pick up the OR farms.
Yeah.
So Annie, would you have to go back and talk to those guys and offer them or tell them that, you know, based on recommendations, they're going to get approved, but it would be only for the $89 rate per acre instead of the 123?
Yes, that's what I would do is, yeah, call Ruben, let him know they are being approved for $89 an acre. We actually did that last year. I think it was another one of Ruben's projects where we called Ruben and said, hey, we want to approve this project, but we can't pay this full amount. Would the landowner be okay with a less money? And he said that they would take whatever they could get to do the practice. So I don't know if this landowner would be the same, but it's worth a shot if we can get one more project in, because that OR farm, if we drop them to $89 an acre, then that would leave us $3,638. Actually, a little bit more, but that would be enough to fund the OR farms. So the OR farms, you can see too, that scored the same as Kimmel and Patterson Ranch.
Yep.
So we were trying to figure out how to get that one funded too. So if we did drop Bluff City down to $89 an acre, we could get that OR Farms in there. To note about OR Farms, that is Heidi's project. She said she wasn't thinking of originally submitting it just because it's such a weird project, but I guess the landowner has a bunch of different little burn units, and she compared it to Swiss cheese. I had included on here $3,290 for 94 acres, but they proposed, that was the max that they proposed. They gave a range. So they proposed 54 to 94 acres. So it would be $1,890 to $3,290. So we still would not be able to get them in if they did the lower acreage. But if we did drop the Bluff City, we could fit them in. Does anyone have any concerns with dropping Bluff City to $89 an acre? If not, I'll go ahead and make a note of that and talk to Ruben about it. And two, after we're all done discussing all of these, I'll edit these spreadsheets to reflect what we've talked about and send it out to the whole steering committee so you can look it over again and then give me a written yes or no if you approve it or not.
Annie, what's a target species on White Rock and Nathaniel Robinson as far as herbicide application?
White Rock would be turkeys. That's another one of our turkey co-ops. Matt Robinson, they were targeting their longleaf pine. And so the background that I've heard from them, they wanted to burn, but they didn't have enough fuel. Jenny and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't have enough fuel, so they wanted to do an herbicide treatment. And so the herbicide treatment was added after they had already been approved for funding by TLIT. It would be a really good project for us to fund since it is longleaf pine, but it made more sense if TLIT could provide the funding to move it to TLIT to get them funded there, even though the cost per acre is less. So Nathaniel Robinson is still getting funded just by a different funding source. Yeah, White Rock, they even sent pictures of turkeys with their proposal. They've been a really great cooperator in the past until this year when they didn't get their burns done. I think they've submitted a proposal every year and been approved every year, which is how they rank out so at the maximum number every year.
Hey, y'all, this is Rusty clicking back in. White Rock has been a really good cooperator, and they were a super stocking site. They let us do research out there, and I wouldn't worry about that extension for that prescribed fire. The weather got away from them, and they just couldn't get it done. But there's no weather restrictions on a herbicide treatment. That's something you got to consider. You can spray no matter what. So I don't have any doubt that they would get that done. And I think that they're probably going to get the prescribed fire done this year if the weather turns out.
And I agree with Rusty too. I think that they will get all of it done. I don't think they would have any problems with the herbicide, but it's just setting the precedent. Do we want to approve a project for another $20,000 if they haven't completed even a quarter of their current project?
And that leads into our next slide.
Yeah. So we can talk about that in a second, but does anybody else have any other comments about these proposals?
Okay, so just to be clear, the aerial herbicide is not specifically mentioned as a practice for the NETX.
No. But we moved it ourselves. They submitted it under the standard HIP. It ranked higher in the Neches River HIP.
It's hard to know if we're just throwing money at something they won't be able to accomplish on the ground, or they can't afford to do it aerial. We don't know that. We don't know. So I'm struggling to make a decision about
Yeah, here's the information from the proposal. Mr. Hoffman is a private landowner who's a wildlife enthusiast and interested in improving his property in ways which native wildlife will benefit significantly. His primary focus is to manipulate the habitat to provide more open understory and improve foraging and breeding habitat for wild turkeys. He is within the Nature's River corridor, which is why we moved it, and understands the importance of maintaining habitat. His objective for this project is to conduct 107-acre aerial herbicide treatment on Chinese tallow within the 2016 Chinese tallow treatment area from the map below. In 2016, the same area was treated with imazamox at a rate of 64 fluid ounces per acre. This herbicide was mixed with 15 gallons of water, blah, 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 blah. The objective for the 2020 treatment of the 2016 units is to kill the existing tallow trees that survive past 2016 and prevent Chinese tallow seed bank from nurturing. Their management plan for the tallow is on a 3 to 4 year rotation. And that is the information that Ruben provided on that one.
That property down there, the city property, like Ruben said on that one, that was funded under the Nature's River and Caddo Basin a couple of years ago. They sprayed, they airly sprayed it, and this is just kind of a follow-up, whatever was left, and then the trees that are coming back through, I guess, is kind of what they're trying to do. It's kind of it's probably a worthy project, but it's going to be a never-ending project. That thing is all floodplain, and it's going to consistently flood and repopulate the tallow.
And I'm not sure why they chose aerial treatment versus on the ground treatment. It doesn't specifically say.
They're spraying clear from the air that they can spray over the top. You can spray clear cast over the top of your hardwoods and not kill your good hardwoods, but it does kill tallow.
Gotcha.
You know, and I guess on that, Annie, if I can chime in, the only thing I'd have a concern over that, Rusty, is again, you're going to spray an area that's already been sprayed. You a lot of times in those cases injure that tree that resprouts or comes back, and a lot of times you don't have the same surface area for that chemical to really do a good job on the second spray. A lot of times you really have to wait and give it, 3-4 years or for even more. And that's just coming from the experience I've got with mesquite and weesatch and some of that South Texas mixed brush country, where you spray it one time, you get killed, you get a lot of flagging, and then you got to wait for that tree or that plant to put enough leaves out to have enough surface area for that chemical to take and be effective.
That's not just the ones, though, that they're trying to retreat, but it's a lot of small trees coming back from the seed bank once they opened that canopy up and killed a lot of the existing tallow. And it kind of opened up the seed bank, and there's a lot of small ones coming in, I think is what the gist of it was.
Also to note, I don't know if this would sway anybody, but it does border the Davy Crockett. It's an in-holding to the Davy Crockett National Forest, which is scored so high. It helped it score higher. It's also right next to the Nature's Bluff project, so there'd be continuity there. It's right there on the Nature's River.
It's probably the same landowner, right, Andy?
No, Nature's Bluff is Amanda Harrelson.
Okay.
This one, Bluff City, is Patrick Hoffman.
Yeah.
So another thing to note on this Bluff City project is, wait, never mind. Scratch that. Thinking of project, but if nobody has a problem with me offering them the $89 an acre so that we can fund the OR farms as well, I will talk to Ruben about that.
Tell you that he has taken less money before.
He has, yes. Not the specific landowner, but Ruben, one of Ruben's, or maybe a couple of Ruben's projects have.
No, definitely that specific landowner, not Matt Robinson, Mr. Hoffman,
Okay.
taking less money. We gave him $10,000 to treat a whole bunch of acres, and he took it, and he just paid the rest out of his pocket.
Okay, I mean, that's good to know too.
It was way less than what he had asked for. And that's his percentage way above the 50% mark or 25% mark, but he took it anyway and still did all of the work.
Well, if you're going to do it anyway, it's better than no money.
Definitely. Okay. So I'll call Ruben and make sure he's good with that, but we'll go ahead right now and say that we're going to approve it at the $89 an acre, so that we can add that OR Farms project, as long as there are no objections. The other projects that are yellow that scored way lower, Baker is a project that came in last year. They didn't even change anything in the proposal, even though the prescribed burning cost per acre went up from $34 to $35. They just sent in the exact same proposal as last year. But Jason Harden is the project manager on that one. He does not recommend it, even though it is part of, it's right up around the turkey co-op that was evaluated last year that did not pass. But a lot of his neighbors are burning as well, so it's possible that this landowner would be able to get in on one of those burns. And then Austin, that was another one of Jason Harden's projects. He said he didn't recommend this one either. The area that they were trying to burn, we had dropped it down to $28 an acre for a volatile fuels burn. It looked like a swampy grassland. He didn't think it would burn, and he also didn't think that this guy, as a personal anecdote, he thinks that this is the owner of Austin Bank, and he doesn't need our money. That's the note from Jason Harden on that one. But, all right. So I guess we can move, if there's no other objections to that, we can move into our next conversation about White Rock. So Bill, next slide. So this is what we need you guys' thoughts on. White Rock has requested an extension. I have not done anything with that yet because they had submitted this other project. So we wanted to talk about how in the future do we want to go about these project extensions. We don't want people, we know White Rock is a really good partner or a good cooperator. They've always completed their work in the past. They just had bad luck with their weather this year for their burning. But they are requesting the extension, and they are requesting more money in a proposal. So we had talked about several different options. Do we deny their new proposal and offer them an extension at a 50% or a reduced cost share rate, like 50% instead of their full 75%? Or do we allow the new proposal and grant them an extension at a reduced cost share? Or do we allow the new proposal and deny the extension? Or do we allow the new proposal and also grant the extension at the full cost share rate? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? How do we need to do that now and in the future if this comes up again?
Well, it seems unfair to really penalize them for weather, for things outside their control. And if they've been a good cooperator in the past and have good projects, but on the previous page, we're talking about the same thing, they didn't score very high.
No, they scored
They scored the highest.
Yeah, it's really because of previous. It was because of the proposal that they have in progress right now, their project, and so the fact that that's not done, and not anywhere close to being done, and I guess our thought process. I mean, it does seem difficult to penalize someone for weather, but it also it's a lot to bite off in a year's time, especially when extensions are not always going to be possible. And so, according to Annie at least, and so it's not as much penalizing as it is. I guess I view it as holding them back a little bit to just finish up what you have, and then we'll move on to your next project. And so, I mean, especially when you're biting off 20 grand at a time.
So it's about the reality of what they can achieve in the project period, and that really the extent sounds like, go ahead and finish up what you had on, we'll extend it, but then apply to us again next year for your next project.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why I guess, Annie and Bill and I have talked about this a lot, but I'm of the opinion, keep granting extensions at the full 75, because you can't penalize these people for, it's happened with a lot of projects that Annie has open right now. You can't penalize them for weather. It's been ridiculous the past 2 years trying to get burns on the ground. But it's just, it's just telling them to put on the brakes a little bit, and so they can handle what they have. So, and Rusty did bring up a good point, and that is something to consider. I mean, it is herbicide this go around, and so, I understand that they would probably be able to get that done. It comes down to the principle of the matter, like Annie was saying. We should probably set some guidelines here, so this doesn't happen in the future, because it's also very possible for it to happen with a landowner that's not a good cooperator, or doesn't have a lot of history, and say he's a first time, it's his first time project, and gets an extension on that, and then 20 more grand the next time, and then Annie's in the hole for 40 grand, and nothing's done. So we just want to avoid
spending that money on other landowners.
Exactly.
Historically, I've granted 3 extensions, and I've had one landowner apply for the same, or 2 landowners now actually apply for the same acres for the new year instead of just getting an extension. 3 out of 4 of those have not completed anything that they requested an extension for. I know in the past there were 2 that were smaller landowners. One was affected by the pandemic. He was a worker in the oil field, and he just could not afford to do the treatments up front, so he pulled out, even though he had an extension through the end of August of this year. One of the landowners was actually Lee's landowner, and he had requested twice, and the first time he did some of the work. The second time we flat out just said we want to cancel this one because he wasn't doing it. He was going all back and forth. He wasn't going on the plan. He wanted to change everything, and we said, all right, you're done, because that was also another $20,000 project. So I know that this year it sounds like there's going to be a couple of landowners that aren't going to finish, that might request an extension. White Rock has already asked if they could get an extension on their burning, so they can complete it this next winter. The problem with that in the future, this year the money is carrying over, but next year it ends. So the Parks and Wildlife money, both of those contracts with NWTF, or MOAs with NWTF, expire at the end of August of next year, and that money is going away. We will not be able to grant any extensions next year. And then the NIFWIF grant money that we have expires at the end of March of this year. So all that money has to be spent by the end of March. So I'm really hoping a lot of the burns get done before the end of March. We're banking on that, unless NIFWIF can grant us an extension. So we can grant extensions right now, but we will not be able to next year. I don't know how that factors into everyone's opinions, but.
Turning my video off, my battery's running low, so I might leave y'all. But it sounds then like the best thing to do for White Rock is to grant them the extension, let them finish out what they had in the plan, and then start fresh next year, so you don't get into a pickle with your funding.
I had my druthers for White Rock guys, just so you know, I would rather see them in this particular case because it's fire versus herbicide. I think they're going to get the best bang for their buck from herbicide because I think they're burning something that's already been herbicided. The one that they're asking for the extension on, I would rather see them forego that burn for another year or burn what they can themselves, but spray another. The current proposal, use that money that's being requested to extend and use that to spray, and then let them burn what they want to burn because I think you're going to get more bang for the buck out of herbicide. And there's actually turkeys on the ground there. That's not a theoretical. There's turkeys there.
That's true. How do we feel about that? Is denying their extension request and accepting their new proposal? Rusty, do you think that they would burn anyways, even if we did not grant them an extension?
They always burn something. It's just a matter of how much. What they've done, and they've been a good partner, which is why I fight so hard for them, but I understand the need for precedence for somebody that doesn't have that history with us. But they always burn something, and then they use our grant money as additive. They put it on top of whatever they were going to burn. So they don't just say, well, we were going to burn this, but we got the grant money, so we're just going to use that instead. They use it additively. So they will still burn some. I don't know how much or what area is scheduled to be burned. But I know that they will spray and burn something on their own.
Okay, so if that's the case, we would have to move White Rock from the Natchez River to our standard HIP. That wouldn't change anything because we could, well, it would a little bit by a couple $1,000s, but we would not be able to fund that with the Natchez River HIP. Because their current project is in the standard HIP. So that would just be some logistical.
It's a matter of shuffling the paperwork, right? Because the money is already in the turkey HIP. Is that what?
Yeah, we would just, bump them over to the standard HIP and then, well, I'd have to do some math.
I would just offer them whatever the extension is and any extra that you've got laying around and let them spray what they were going to spray. All that good and deny the extension if that's.
Yeah, it would just be a matter of shuffling some paperwork around.
So the thought is to not do the extension, but and so their new proposal would be that 15,000.
20,000.
No, they're new.
Yeah,
that's not the correct number for what they have currently. They finished 45 acres of their burn in the standard HIP this past year, and they're going to request reimbursement for $1,393. So they're requesting an extension for $18,595. So essentially, I think what Rusty's saying is that we would deny their grant extension or their extension for this prescribed burning and say, we'll apply this to the herbicide. How do you guys feel about that? So we would say they would get $18,595 and whatever else we have laying around to meet that 19,000 for 281 acres of herbicide. That would be a higher cost per acre, less acres for how much we'd be paying them, but it would be an herbicide treatment and they would still burn anyways. At that point, we would still be paying them for some kind of practice. Just we have to decide which practice we want to pay them for, or if we want to pay them for both.
Yeah, I like Rusty's call on that. I mean, it makes the most sense on the ground.
What if they don't pay? What if they don't burn at all?
Well, that's what we're saying. That's what Rusty's trying to say is that you're gonna get more bang for your buck with denying the extension, which is something that we didn't really talk about. Denying the extension for the prescribed burning and allowing the new proposal with the herbicide. And Rusty brought up another point too. You know, I'm looking over their proposal right now. The burning that they're or the burning that they already have, that was in an herbicide treated area, and it's the same. I bet it's the same thing that they're going to do this, because it's a 14 to 18-year-old pine plantation that has been first thinned with the desired result of creating nesting and brood habitat for eastern wild turkeys that have been stocked on the property. And so that's what they're spraying in. And so I guess what Rusty's trying to say is it would make more sense to they get more bang for their buck doing that herbicide than rolling the dice with another shoddy burn season. And then, you know, they don't have any money for the herbicide either.
Yeah, you know, last year through the Neches River, we funded White Rock for 537 acres of herbicide. So that's probably what they've been burning this past year. I haven't put it on a map to double check on that, but that would make sense. I mean, White Rock has been a really good partner. They've always finished their projects. But I agree that we would have a better chance if we have another wet spring this next year. We would have a better chance at getting the herbicide done than rolling the dice on the burn, the remaining acres of the burns.
And a lot of these burns that people are doing, you know, I'd like to be able to ground check every single project on, you know, just out of curiosity. I mean, a lot of these burns could probably benefit from some herbicide beforehand, and undoubtedly, really. So the fact that they're doing it that way, and they're probably going to burn this in a year or two. So I like it.
So do we like that idea, denying the extension and accepting their proposal? Moving their proposal to the standard HIP? That wouldn't change anything, but are we okay with that?
Quick clarification, Annie. The extension, when does their agreement terminate? When is the time lapse?
The work in the agreement, the work has to be done by August 31st, 2020.
So it's not going to happen.
No.
Unless they.
No, I had asked Sean if he was willing to do any warm season burns, and he said no. So.
We're beyond warm season burns.
Yeah.
We're into just killing trees burns now.
Yeah. So I mean, the agreements go for 5 years, essentially saying that when you sign on to this agreement, you're agreeing to keep the habitat suitable and in that condition or better for the next 5 years. But the treatment has to be done by August 31st, 2020. And so that's how we sign all the agreements, is that they have to be done within the year.
So Annie, just to simplify this, could we just, moving forward, could it just be, you can't double dip? And you can't have both a new proposal and an extension. If you want to keep the project you have going, that's great. We'll leave that for you, or you can start the new project.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
I like that idea a lot. Yeah, you can decide if you want to extend your current project or submit a new project.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Just write it into your score sheet.
Mm-hmm.
First line, do you have an existing uncompleted project? 0.
Stop here.
Yeah. I mean,
Saves
that's a good idea. I mean, we can adjust the evaluation criteria moving forward. I know we've had some questions. We've talked about the evaluation criteria. There's certain, we need to ask for more information on the proposals, essentially, because I've had to do a lot of phone calls to project managers asking follow-up questions that weren't answered in the proposal. So we need to talk about that moving forward, but probably next year before the next RFP, if we can find more funding. Because currently all of our funding is going to run out this is our last RFP where we have guaranteed funding. So we need to be thinking about that in the future too. Is Texas Parks and Wildlife going to be able to give us more funding? for the HIP like they have in the past? Are they being too affected by the coronavirus pandemic financially, so they won't have extra money? I don't know. We don't have any NIFWIF grants in the works, as far as I know, unless Keith knows differently or Bill. We had talked about it, but then didn't move forward with submitting the NIFWIF. So that's just something to know too. We're out of money. This is our last RFP.
This is Keith real quickly. Unless NIFWIF's funding sources shift significantly, we're not going to be able to get project money from NIFWIF. They are, looks like they're going to still be willing or want to support capacity and monitoring, but not landowner payments, unfortunately.
Okay, so we would depend on Texas Parks and Wildlife. Anybody from TPWD know if there would be money potentially for next year. Jeff Rush, I don't think ever joined. He's the one that gives us the money, and I don't think that there's anything in the works right now with Jason Harden on getting more PR money. We had talked about it, but have not moved forward with anything on that either.
Well, the other option too is what we've talked about with a possible RCPP proposal that would try and get new resources from Farm Bill funds. Rigo, we just have to find the right places that wouldn't overtask your staff.
All right, so I'll make a note that we'll deny their grant extension for White Rock and shift them over to the standard HIP and accept their proposal for herbicide.
Whoops. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I think we're good on this slide, Bill.
Okay. This is where we wanted to plow through with the rest of the program.
It's also when we said, surely we'll get this done in an hour. Now working on an hour and a half. So
It's a great discussion though, guys.
Yeah.
I can't do it all by myself. I need a team, so I really appreciate it.
So that brings up the question: does anybody need a break? A 10-minute break? This is sort of a good good time to take it, or do y'all want to plow on through? I'll take silence as plowing on through. So to open up this next part, we're really just going over some leadership changes that have happened, some new positions on the steering committee. Need to talk about a potential meeting with the CDN like we do every year. It's more than likely going to be virtual at this point. We're probably not looking at any in-person meetings. I know my agency is not looking into that anytime soon. So I would assume that's pretty much the same across the board. So trying to maybe do something online, seeing y'all's thoughts on that, whether webinars or whatever we could do, some speakers, getting that lined out. If there's any other calendar considerations coming up in these next couple months, Bill wanted to mention that the TLIT team steering committee meeting is July 30th, and then there's short leaf pine field days in October to be determined when that's going to happen exactly. Bill, you can move on to the next slide. Here's the steering committee. We have had a couple changes with NRCS, with Mike leaving. and the Nature Conservancy, and then also Parks and Wildlife. And so have some new folks. Not all of them are on with us today. That's what the steering committee looks like right now. Any questions on that? Okay. The working groups, it's been sort of hit or miss with these working groups. There's, and I've talked to Bill about this too, and some may not agree with me, but it seems like a lot of the working groups, even if there's good work happening in their area, I think it's single folks that are doing that. I'm not sure that I know that even before COVID, it was a struggle to get working groups actually meeting up with each other. I don't see a huge problem with that. I mean, there's obviously been enough collaboration. It's not like we have, I mean, we're turning projects away, so it's not like we aren't getting work. And I think it's because of a couple people that are putting in some really good work. But for example, I know Ruben is a heavy hitter when it comes to a lot of project submissions. I don't think that's his working group. That's just Ruben. So, but those are the leads for those working groups right now. Some of them completely inactive. Some of them are at least producing some projects. So, anything else to add on that, Bill or Annie? Okay, we'll move on. I'm good with moving on. So the prescribed fire working group, that was Jason and Bill saw the need for that. When Jason Estrella was here, the three of us actually went to that prescribed fire council meeting back in February of last year, and saw the need to establish some sort of working group within the CDN, just focusing on prescribed fire. There are a lot of different goals that were tossed around there. Those are some of the ones that are listed on the slide there. Those are some of the goals that Jason had for the working group. I was the lead of that working group for a while. I ran into a lot of issues that I won't go into in depth because Annie and Bill are probably tired of hearing about it. But just a lot of agency issues when it comes to landowner direction on how to conduct prescribed burns tactically on their own. That's something that my agency, that TFS steers away from, and landowners burning without good liability insurance, and that's really what it comes down to. So I especially after having to be the chair of the CDN now, at least for the rest of the year, and I wanted to step down, and even before that, I wanted to step down from the prescribed burn working group, just because I don't think that needs to be a TFS guy. I really think it needs to be a TPWD guy. Their TPWD is just a lot more lenient when it comes to prescribed burning, and allowed to do conduct burns on private property. Their private landowner workshops that they do. That is something I as a TFS employee can't get anywhere near. So just makes more sense to be really someone not in TFS. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have TFS folks on the working group. Just as a lead, I think it'd be better fit for TPWD. Tony Aguilar is the name, the obvious name that got brought up. And if y'all are good with it, I'll probably give her a call and see what she wants to see, if she's okay with leading a group. There are other goals. I mean, I had lofty goals of trying to get a prescribed burn association together, which it's not going to happen. Not with me as TFS. And landowner workshops, I think would be an easy way to just get a lot of people in the same room and get them interested. So just trying to get the word out there. I mean, you can go a lot of places with that, with the burn working group. So any thoughts on that from anyone? Okay. What do we have next, Phil? Or is that it?
That is it.
Okay. So any closing remarks from anyone? Well, I want to appreciate everybody for signing on. Sorry that it lasted an hour and a half. Isn't bad. I think that's reasonable. Thanks a lot to Annie, who really did the bulk of this work, putting all these projects together, and Bill for taking the lead on getting this presentation together. So another thing that I did not mention is that I am acting chair right now. I'm not chair, and probably will be through the end of the year, just because the logistics of getting someone else in place doing this just doesn't make much sense until we really get back to normal. But Bill and Annie have been carrying the CDN through the project submission, so really appreciate all the help there. And yeah, appreciate everybody being on. And if that's all, we can sign off.
Thanks for everyone's comments on these sheets. I'll go ahead and send these out to everyone so that you can review them again and make sure you're good with it.
That sounds good. And if anybody wants any material from any project to see details, we can provide that as well.
Yep, let me know.